Hello everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of History. I'm Artie, the Minister of History, and today we're going to be talking about the Armistice of November 1918, which brought the fighting of the First World War to an end. So the Armistice was signed on the 11th of November 1918 between Germany and the Allies, which officially consisted of Britain, the United States and France, but at the Armistice, the Allies were represented by Britain and France. So why did the Armistice happen? Well, it happened because Germany wanted it to happen. And the reason is because Germany was in a pretty awful state. At war's end, Germany had lost an estimated 2.5 million people. And in total, the total number of deaths in the First World War are estimated to have been around 20 million people. Up until then, the most devastating conflict in human history, fought in horrible conditions, in the trenches, with new warfare like machine guns, gas, chemical warfare, all of this stuff. And yeah, as I said, up until then, the most devastating conflict in human history. But then obviously the Second World War would be even more devastating, because the thing about the First World War is that it was actually pretty stagnant. It didn't really move that much, certainly on the Western Front. But the Second World War was a lot more mobile and was fought sort of all over the place. So in Germany, by October 1918, you had starvation, strikes, and actually a revolution. So essentially, Germany's ports had been blockaded since the beginning of the First World War in 1914 by the British Royal Navy. So Germans were starving, and it's estimated that around 500,000 Germans died because of starvation during the First World War. Also, German workers were on strike. They were striking because of shortages, war weariness, and also, having seen the Russian Revolution happen in Russia in March 1917, they thought, that actually looks like quite a good deal. We want some of that. So that's why there are a lot of strikes, workers wanting a revolution to happen in Germany as well. And also the German army, which had been massively depleted, were pretty fed up. Because the previous year in 1917, the United States had joined the war. But it was only almost a year later, in March 1918, that fresh-faced US troops arrived on the Western Front. So the war-weary German army and navy, after 4 years of horrible, catastrophic war, were also in the mood to revolt. And that meant that at the end of October 1918, you essentially had the complete social and economic breakdown of Germany. And finally, after all this pressure building up from the mutinous armies, the strikes, the starving German population, the Kaiser Wilhelm II, abdicated on the 9th of November 1918, bringing an end to the German monarchy. And a German republic was proclaimed by Philipp Scheidemann from the window of the Reichstag. The Kaiser went into exile in the Netherlands, where he would spend the rest of his life. So with the abdication of the Kaiser, the priority of the new Republican German government was to seek an end of the fighting. Now, the negotiations for the armistice had actually started the day before the Kaiser abdicated, and a German MP called Matthias Erzberger had crossed over the front line into the Allied territories and started negotiating with the Allies. So where did this happen? It happened in the railway carriage of Supreme Allied Commander Ferdinand Foch's private train in a clearing in the Compiègne forest about 75 kilometers northwest of Paris. I recently visited the site, and this is actually why I'm doing this video. Now there is a memorial there, and it's a huge clearing for the whole memorial, and it's not how it would have looked back then. Back then it would have been a simple wooded clearing, and the reason why it was chosen to do these negotiations in just a wooded area in the middle of a forest is because Foch wanted to be able to stay away from snooping journalists, and also he was worried that the German delegation would actually be attacked by locals. So that is why they chose this very hidden away clearing in the Compiègne forest. So who signed it? Well, as I mentioned, Ferdinand Foch was the Supreme Allied Commander of the Allied forces, and he was appointed so in March 1918. So he was a French general who was known for his aggressive tactics, and he played a crucial role in stopping the German offences in 1918. So he actually insisted on rather harsh terms for Germany in the armistice, believing that they needed to be fully disarmed to prevent further conflicts. However, what's interesting is he actually later criticized the Treaty of Versailles, which was signed in June 1919, saying famously that this is not peace, it's an armistice for 20 years. Also present in that famed train carriage was Maxime Weygand, who was Foch's chief of staff and close advisor. So he was a key figure in the negotiations, but less prominent than Foch. And ironically, Weygand would then go on to play a crucial role in France's surrender in 1940 in the Second World War to the Germans. Now, representing Britain was Sir Rosslyn Weems. So he was the first Sea Lord, which meant that he was head of the all-powerful British Navy, which dominated the seas and had blockaded Germany throughout the duration of the First World War. And he was actually the British naval officer who had actually been instrumental in implementing this naval blockade of Germany. So Weems was actually a little bit more pragmatic than Foch, and he had actually also wanted to sign the armistice very quickly to avoid further suffering. And this was actually a big bone of contention between him and British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, because David Lloyd George had actually wanted to hold off for a bit longer in order to get tougher terms against Germany. So as I mentioned, representing Germany was an MP by the name of Matthias Erzberger. So he was head of the German delegation, and obviously being an MP was from the civilian population, so he was not a member of the military. So he was a member of the Catholic Centre Party, a member of the Reichstag, and also a minister without portfolio in the newly Republican German government. After the negotiations concluded, he was forced to sign the armistice under protest, knowing that the harsh terms would be very unpopular in Germany, but he didn't really have a choice. He wanted to end the fighting. Erzberger would end up being assassinated in 1921 by far-right extremists who saw him as a traitor. So the key terms of the armistice were German troop withdrawal from all Allied territory, surrender of weapons, and the occupation of the Rhineland. So very, very humiliating for Germany. So at 2:15 a.m., the German delegation, led by Matthias Erzberger, meets with Ferdinand Foch and the Allied representatives in this railway carriage in the Compiègne forest. So negotiations resume, but Germany has little room to bargain, and the Allies demand full withdrawal, surrender of military equipment, and the occupation of the Rhineland. Erzberger protests the harsh terms, but knows that the refusal means Germany faces total collapse. So he doesn't really have a choice. So at 5:12 a.m., the armistice is signed in the train carriage in that clearing in the Compiègne forest. So Erzberger, under pressure, signs the armistice along with the other German delegates. Foch and the other Allied representatives sign as well. However, the ending of hostilities does not take effect straight away. It would come into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Now, Foch doesn't shake hands with the German delegates. He wants to show that Germany has been defeated and not negotiated with as equals. Now in this picture you see Ferdinand Foch standing outside the carriage of the train just after the armistice had been signed, surrounded by the Allied delegation. So at 11 a.m. the ceasefire takes effect, so fighting continues for the next 6 hours. And at 10:58 a.m. Canadian soldier George Price is shot and becomes the last official combat death of the First World War. So at 11 a.m. on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the so-called Great War is finally over after 4 years of horrific tragedy. Soldiers in the trenches cheer, embrace, and celebrate, while others remain in shock after 4 years of this catastrophic war. Celebrations erupt in London, Paris, and New York, with massive crowds cheering impromptu celebrations. In Germany, the mood is obviously more somber. Many feel betrayed, leading to the stab in the back myth, which extremists like Hitler will then later exploit. So what were the long-term consequences of the armistice? It led to the Treaty of Versailles, which was signed on the 28th of June 1919 on the 5th anniversary of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo, and this included very harsh terms against Germany, including big reparations, losses of territory, demilitarization, and also having to accept full responsibility for starting the war. All of this contributed to the conditions which would enable the rise of extremism on both sides, so nationalism and communism, in Germany. And Hitler later exploited this anger over the armistice and the Treaty of Versailles. And many historians believe that the Treaty of Versailles set the stage for the Second World War. Every year on the 11th of November, Remembrance Day is celebrated across the Allied countries. In Britain and other Commonwealth countries, we wear a poppy in remembrance of the people who died in the First World War, but it is also now meant to be a remembrance for people who died in other wars since then as well. And it is called Remembrance Day. Well, I hope you guys found that video about the armistice informative. If you are ever in Paris, definitely take the train to the memorial up in Compiègne. It's about just under an hour's journey from Paris to Compiègne, and then you get a taxi or you can drive there. The memorial is actually also free. I went there on a Tuesday, and of course, the museum was closed, so I didn't get to see the replica of the train carriage where the armistice had been signed. However, the actual memorial, the clearing where the armistice was signed, is open to the public and is fully open, so even on Tuesdays you can access it. I would definitely recommend it because you definitely feel the kind of weight of history there, and that something very kind of seismic and very consequential happened there. So I would recommend it. Anyway, thank you guys for watching and see you next time. Bye. So here, right in the center of the clearing, you have a large stone slab with some writing on it. And it says in French, here on the 11th of November 1918, the criminal pride of the German Empire was defeated by the free people that they tried to enslave. So obviously quite sort of strong words, and this stone slab was destroyed in 1941.